Public transportation is an important part of our urban structure. Moving a large number of people at one time is always going to be much more efficient than every person taking an individual path. On top of that, riding the rails can help you cover more ground faster as you don't normally have to deal with traffic. Sure, trains can get delayed, but for the most part you can get from point A to point B in a more direct route. The great thing about a train over a car is that you don't have to drive, so you can focus your attention elsewhere. Sometimes, though, the train driver's attention is also focused somewhere else. The Lewisham rail crash occurred on December 4, 1957 during a particularly foggy evening in London. Throughout the day, train services had been disrupted due to poor visibility, which only worsened as darkness fell. The fog was exceptionally thick, with visibility estimates ranging from 20 to 50 feet or 6 to 15 meters in the area of the accident. The fog was especially thick in the 3/4 mile or 1.2 kilometer cutting between New Cross and St. John's. These conditions made it extremely difficult for train drivers to see signals clearly, setting the stage for the tragic events that followed. The Ramsgate-bound express train pulled by a Battle of Britain-class locomotive was following behind an electric multiple unit or EMU train at a relatively short distance. The design of the locomotive's cab and boiler, particularly its aerodynamic covers, made it challenging for the driver to spot the trackside signals, which were placed to the right of the tracks. The driver of the express train, W.J. True, missed 2 yellow warning signals that should have alerted him to slow down. Those signals were crucial in warning the driver of an upcoming stop. However, due to the poor visibility in the design of the locomotive, True was unable to see the signals clearly. A reenactment of the journey showed that in those conditions, the driver would have needed 240 feet or 73 meters of visibility to see the signals before they disappeared behind the locomotive's boiler covering. At around 6:20 p.m., the Hayes-bound electric train was standing stationary on the down-through line just beyond St. John's Station. Its brakes were applied as it waited at a red signal. Meanwhile, the steam train from Cannon Street was approaching from behind. By the time True saw the lights of the stationary Hayes train, it was too late to stop. The steam train collided with the rear of the electric train. The electric train was carrying almost 1,500 passengers, while the steam train had about 700. The front of the Ramsgate train's engine embedded itself into the motorman's compartment of the rearmost coach of the electric train. The impact caused severe damage to both trains. In the Hayes train, the rear coach's underframe was lifted and crumpled for about 5 feet or 1.5 meters. The 9th coach had its front and rear compartments crushed together, each for about half of its length. Further up the train, 2 carriages were forced upwards and together due to the impact from behind. The Ramsgate train suffered even more severe damage. Its leading coach left the track and crashed into the bridge carrying the railway from Nunhead to Lewisham. That collision knocked away a supporting column, causing 2 steel girders to fall onto the first 2 coaches of the still-moving steam train. The 3 leading coaches of the Ramsgate train were practically demolished by the fallen bridge. The impact of the crash caused several carriages to derail and crash into nearby houses and a school playground. The accident could have been even worse. An electric train approaching the bridge from Nunhead narrowly avoided being involved. Its driver saw the unfolding disaster below and managed to stop before it got to the collapsed bridge. As the fog cleared and the daylight broke, the full extent of the damage became visible. The twisted bridge and the wreckage beneath it painted a grim picture of one of the worst railway accidents in British history. The aftermath of the crash saw an immediate response from emergency services and local residents. The first responders arrived at the scene by 6:25 p.m., with fire brigade, ambulance, and police personnel working alongside doctors and nurses. The rescue operation was further supported by various organizations, including the Salvation Army, the Women's Voluntary Service, and St. John Ambulance Brigade. Local residents played a crucial role in the rescue efforts, opening their homes and offering assistance to the rescuers. Despite the challenging conditions, with dense fog and darkness making the work extremely difficult, the rescuers showed remarkable determination and efficiency. One newspaper reporter described the scene as Dante-esque, with rescue workers, quote, moving like ghosts in the all-embracing fog, guided by the screams of the injured trapped in the wreckage. By 10:30 p.m., all of the injured had been transported to hospitals. The initial casualty count was severe, with 76 people reported dead, including the guard of the electric train, and 193 injured, 116 of them seriously. The casualty count would end up being 90. Railway historian Christian Walmar would say in a later interview, quote, steam engines were incredibly heavy and electric trains at the time had very little crash impact resistance. It's like knocking balsa wood and would inevitably lead to an increase in the number of casualties. The collision was ultimately the result of human error compounded by the challenging weather conditions. The investigation revealed that W.J. True did not take appropriate measures to compensate for the poor visibility. He neither crossed over to the right side of the cab to see the signals better, nor asked the firemen to look out for and call out the signals. The firemen, trusting in the driver's decision-making, only called out the red signal, believing that True had seen the two previous yellow signals. The accident report concluded that an automatic warning system would have prevented the collision. However, at the time, priority for installing such systems was being given to mainline routes controlled by semaphore signals. The report also highlighted the poor visibility of signals from the steam locomotive and recommended fitting them with wider windscreens to improve visibility. Following the accident, the Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation appointed the Chief Inspecting Officer of Railways to conduct an official inquiry into the accident. The investigation was thorough, involving interviews with witnesses, examination of signal visibility along the line, and tests to check for any faults in the signaling equipment. The Ministry of Transport report on the collision was published in 1958. It aimed to uncover the causes of the accident and draw lessons for future railway operations. However, some questioned whether a broader investigation involving an independent chairman and assessors might have been more appropriate given the scale of the disaster. The inquiry's findings highlighted 4 key factors that contributed to the accident. The first was human error. The report concluded that the driver of the Ramsgate-bound train had failed to slow down after passing 2 caution signals, leaving him unable to stop at the danger signal. The second was poor visibility. The dense fog significantly impaired the driver's ability to see the signals clearly. The third was locomotive design. The report noted the poor visibility of signals from the steam locomotive, recommending that they be fitted with wider windscreens to improve visibility. And the last was a lack of an automatic warning system. The inquiry concluded that an automatic train control of the warning type would have prevented the collision. Based on those findings, the report recommended the installation of automatic warning systems, an improved locomotive design, and better incident management. The report highlighted the need for improved procedures for dealing with stranded trains and managing serious incidents. The collision accelerated the introduction of the automatic warning system to protect against similar incidents. The Rail Safety and Standards Board defines AWS as, quote, an audible and visual indication of whether the distance signal was clear or at caution. Should the driver fail to respond to a warning indication, an emergency brake application will be initiated. Christian Walmar said, quote, AWS had been invented in the early 1900s and nobody much took an interest in it despite the fact that disasters from trains going through red signals was not uncommon. There were repeated calls by HM Railways Inspectorate after lots of these accidents to bring in AWS more quickly and they were ignored, largely because the culture was that shit happens basically. On October 8, 1952, an overnight express train from Perth in Scotland crashed into the rear of a local passenger train standing at a platform at the station. The wreckage blocked adjacent lines and was struck within seconds by a double-headed express train traveling north at 60 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour. The Ministry of Transport report on the crash found that the driver of the Perth train had passed a caution signal and 2 danger signals before colliding with the local train. The reason for that was never established, as both the driver and the firemen of the Perth train were killed in the accident. On top of that, 110 more people were killed and 340 were injured, leading to British Railways installing automatic warning systems on all tracks, but priority was being given to mainline routes, so by 1957 they hadn't been installed on the Eastern Main Line. The Lewisham crash supposedly sped up that process, but by 1977 only a third of the track in the UK had an AWS. Nowadays, electronic monitoring devices, GPS, and computerized tracking systems monitor every part of the rails, so you're much less likely to be involved in a train crash. Even so, we should still make sure the train driver is paying attention to what's in front of him. Thanks for letting us tell you this sinister story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and hit like, rate it, or leave a comment. Join us next week when we'll take you somewhere sinister.